So hi, I'd just like to start by saying, if you get anything out of this, I always start by this message, I think it's really important. If you get anything out of this talk today, then it's all glory to God. And if you sat there bored, that's all glory to me. So let's hope God's in this for both of our sakes. And so, as you said, yeah, I had 2 abortions, but my story of abortion did not start the day I found out I was pregnant. Every abortion story always starts from your childhood. And that's not to make an excuse, it's just the way it was. And in some respects, it's how we are set up to, in some ways, fail. And so my abortion story started when I was 3. I was with my mum and dad, and my dad was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it was quite an interesting time. We had got religious mania, and if you get schizophrenia and religious mania together, it gets very interesting. My dad often used to think he was Jesus or Judas or anybody in between. And he used to play Scrabble with God, and he used to win, and I think God led him. So, very interesting upbringing. So my mum and dad split up when I was 3, and I went to live with my mum, and my mum's family decided one night that there just wasn't room for me, and so we became homeless. So at the age of 3, I just come on an adventure. I don't know I'm homeless, but my mum obviously does, and my mum decides that she has to give me up, and she has to give me up to my dad. But even though he'd got schizophrenia and was fighting his own demons, he'd also got a family. So I was on the doorstep of my grandparents' house and my uncle's house and my auntie and uncle and their kids, a massive house. And my mum thought it was the best place that, I could be. What my mum didn't realise is that day she dropped me off into my own sort of living hell. I was a teacher for many years, and being a teacher, nowadays we look out for all the signs of abuse, but this was the 70s. And the abuse from now is the same as it was in the 70s, more than it was covered up in the 70s. And there was emotional abuse and physical abuse and sexual abuse and every kind of abuse you can imagine that was there is now present today. And I was subject to every kind of abuse. And many people always think, well, the worst kind of abuse must have been the sexual abuse. And as sorted as it was, for me, it wasn't the worst abuse. The worst abuse for me was the neglect. You see, I knew from a very young age that I wasn't loved and I wasn't wanted. And when children are brought up in a family like this, you have to survive. And I don't think for 1 second I was going to die. There were moments where I had no medical care, where I thought, this is the end. But for me, the worst thing knowing that I wasn't loved and knowing that I had to survive this. So psychiatrists have worked out that when you're in that sort of abuse for that many years, that children to survive either become invisible or they become rebellious. Everybody always thinks I'm a rebellious one because of my hair. That's no. And or they become a people pleaser, and I became a people pleaser. I decided that I was going to make my family love me, so I'd do anything and everything for them, just to get the odd smile, just to get the odd well done, Rachel. And as children, and even as adults, as you know, with the pro-aborts, if you hear something often enough, you'll believe it. And I heard this quote from a very young age: you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. But I knew that that wasn't true. I knew I could choose my husband. And I thought from a very young age, I wanted to escape this nightmare that I was living, and I wanted a husband. But I didn't know how to find a husband. I didn't know what skills I'd need and that I was worth cherishing. I just knew the life I'd had. So I would go out with all the wrong kinds of men. And I'd just go out with anyone that showed me any kind of affection. And I would do anything, and I became incredibly promiscuous. And when I say promiscuous, I mean like thousands of times with hundreds of men. And I didn't know any better, and I thought that's the way I would get somebody, just to say. All you had to say to me to get me in bed was to say, one day I'm going to marry you. I thought, oh, this is it. And so the first time I got pregnant, I was still at school, and I was about 17 or 18 years old, and I was in sixth form. And it was actually on the BBC documentary that I worked out that I was 18. And it was on the documentary that they asked me, how old was you when you were pregnant for the first time? I said, I don't know. I said, well, how can you not know? But you see, the first stage of grief is denial. And I just couldn't go there. So they asked me, well, tell me about that day when you went for the abortion. I said, well, I got my school uniform on, I picked up my bag with my clothes in, and I got in my car. And I was, wow, I got in my car, I was 18. So I actually found out the same day that the BBC found out how old I was. And you see, as an 18-year-old, I looked about 25. It's really strange when you're young, you do everything to look old, and now I'm old and doing everything to look young. It's like mental. And so I looked a lot older than what I was. But you see, my emotional state was probably stunted at like an 8-year-old. And the only way I can describe being pregnant for the first time is I wanted to be unpregnant. I wanted the problem to go away. See, I went to a Catholic school, I watched Silent Scream, I knew abortion was wrong. And yet the fear, the false evidence of being real was louder. I didn't have God in my life, but I knew what Little Red Leg sounded like. You see, he became my prosecutor and my defender all in one. So first of all, he defended me. He said, Rachel, you can't tell your family, they're going to kill you. You can't tell anybody at school, that's the end of your school life. You're not going to survive this. Nobody's ever going to want to marry you. And I believed the lies that Little Red Legs told me. And I went into that abortion centre, which I know now is actually a maternity ward in Warsaw. And I had my first abortion. And I was probably around, I must find out, I must get my medical notes one of these days. And I was probably about 24 weeks pregnant, which sounds shocking, but it doesn't sound as shocking as me saying I was actually 6 months pregnant. You see, in the language used in terms of weeks, it doesn't sound as bad. And when I came out of the operating table, out of the theatre, how did I feel? Relief. And then I heard Little Red Legs, and he said, you suddenly became my prosecutor, and he said, you're going to hell, and God's never going to forgive you, and God will never want you. And I stuck in that denial for many, many years. And then when I was about 22, I was actually working in a Catholic school, which is remarkable, because there was nothing Catholic about me. And I was teaching children about a Jesus that I hadn't even got a clue who he was. But I could talk it, but I couldn't walk it. And so I had my second abortion, I think, when I was about 22, because from the age of 18 to 22, I was taking the abortive pill that I now know, the morning after pill. Because it doesn't prevent a pregnancy, it stops the pregnancy, it's an abortion. And I was swallowing them like a paracetamol. So my second abortion was easier. You see, I already knew I was going to hell. I'd already believed that lie. So I couldn't go to hell twice. But my second abortion is probably why I'm standing in front of you today. Because you see, I was awake for my second abortion. I chose not to be put to sleep. And I chose that not as a form of self-harm, but I had a fear of hospitals and I just wanted to get out as quick as I could. And that day I had every one of my senses violated. So I was blinded by the lights on the operating table. I was deafened by the noise of this vacuum suction going on. The feeling, the pain, I can't begin to describe, let alone what I did to my child. Goodness knows what pain that Paul went through. And so, when the abortion was over, the only way I can describe the pain was white light. I thought the abortionist would just leave the room, and suddenly it came to the left-hand side of me and he started doing something. And he didn't even have the sensitivity to leave the room. He counted the body parts of my baby in front of me. And I walked out of that abortionist room, and I walked out of that abortion clinic, bouncing off the walls. I was just in that much shock. And how did I feel? I felt relieved. You see, I had a problem and it just went away. So much I thought it had gone away. And I just carried on living this cycle of denial and anger. You see, there's 5 stages to grief. There's anger, and there's denial, and there's bargaining and depression, so you get to the acceptance. And the acceptance is where the light is, it's where you stop going round in circles. But I was going to spend many years in anger and trying to fix my feelings with tattoos. I call tattoos posh self-harming. I'm allowed to call them that because I've got them. And piercings and drink and drugs and men and men and men. My life was shocking. But life was also to come crashing down. You see, if you don't get on your knees, God's going to put you on your knees. And unfortunately for me, thank God, my mum was praying for me. And if you've got a mum praying for you, you really don't stand a chance. My mum was one of the biggest naggers till I came on the scene with God. And I was being blackmailed. I was being blackmailed over the abortion, so my mum found out. And she came round the table. And I'd like to think she did what Jesus would have done. She came round the table and she said, "Do you not know how much I love you? And you need God in your life, and you need Rachel's Vineyard." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "It's post-abortive support, and it's a weekend retreat for men and women who've been affected by abortion." And immediately my guard went up. Immediately I went into anger. And I told Mum and God and Rachel's Vineyard exactly where they could go. And it was going to take another 8 years of my mum nagging me every month to go before I got on my knees. And when I got on my knees and I cried out to God, within 3 weeks I'm in Medjugorje and I bump into a priest who tells me that I've had abortions. And he comes up to me and he said, "Have you ever had an abortion?" I said, "Yeah, but I've already told a priest in England, so I don't have to tell you, Father." And he turned around and he said, "I'm not asking because of that." He said, "I'm one of 2 priests in the whole of Ireland and happens to be in Medjugorje today." He's a part of an organisation called Rachel's Vineyard. Have you heard of them? I thought, heard of them, that ran down my throat. I knew it was God. And so I ended up in Rachel's Vineyard in Cork, and everybody that was there was absolutely broken, except for me. You see, to survive my childhood, I picked up this button where I didn't have to feel anymore, and I didn't have to let you know how I was feeling. And I got to this day and I had a severe beating of my grandma, and I decided to stand up, and she hit me again. I stood. She walked out exhausted, and I slid down the wall, thinking, yes, I'd won. And from that day, I clicked this button, I didn't have to feel. But at Rachel's Vineyard, it wasn't so easy to do that, because you have to go through the stages at Rachel's Vineyard of grief. You see, the complication of grief is bad enough, but you add an extra layer if you killed your own children. That's a really hard place for people to go to. And I'm at Rachel's Vineyard, and we have to do some work, first of all, on anger. I said, "I'm not angry, I forgive everybody." And you caught on quicker than me. So they said, "You need to do some work on anger." I looked at the counsellor, because the team is made up of counsellor and priest, post-abortive people. I said, "I'm not angry." She wanted to do some work on anger. I said, "Well, can I do some work on forgiveness?" She said, "No, I need you to do some work on anger." I said, "Well, can I do some work maybe if I was angry?" She said, "No, do work on angry." I thought, "Gosh, I'm angry with you." She said, "Well, start there." And so I wrote about anger. "I'm angry at my grandma never wanting me around. Children should be seen and never a single sound. I'm angry at the anger and all that it fed, and I'm angry with her silence and with what she said. I'm angry at the confusion, never knowing right from wrong, and I'm angry I never ever felt that I belong. I'm angry at the lies that were told to me a child. I'm angry, but I'll hide it in case I do grow wild. I'm angry for my mum, she had to leave, life so mean, and I'm angry at what and could have and how things should have been. I'm angry at the violence, and I'm angry at the anger and the violence in my head, and I'm angry I no longer feel, not even for the dead. I'm angry at my uncles for their sick and perverse way, for picking on little Rachel, who was such easy prey. I'm angry at my sisters for leaving when she did, because on that day I got my feelings and I hit them with a lid. I'm angry at the men who never knew I'd cried for love, and I'm angry at God for looking in from above. I'm angry at mental illness and what it took from me, and I'm angry at the blindness and the years I couldn't see. I'm angry with the button I used to hide my feelings deep, and I'm angry I can't even open up and allow you to see me weep. I'm angry at the strength I have to stop my anger being seen, and I'm angry at the illnesses and what I could have, should have been. That's a lot of anger for somebody who wasn't angry. When all that anger came out, there was this big hole inside of me that needs to be filled. And it was filled by the words, the soothing arm of a priest that completely changed my life. You see, I turned to him and I said, "You see, everybody else is crying because they've got children. They went on to be mothers and fathers. that as my second abortion was quite a botched abortion, I even had an operation last year to try and mend some of my organs, that I couldn't be a mum. And he started crying. I can't stand to see men cry, let alone this whole beautiful praise. And he turned around and he said, Rachel, it's not that you could have been a mum, you are a mum. I was like, you what? He said, you're a mum. And he said, I stand in front of you today, a mum of Jude and Paul. And Jude and Paul aren't here today because their mum killed them. But Jude and Paul love me to bits, and I can't wait to meet me. And I can't bring Jude and Paul back, but I can stop the Judes and Pauls from dying in this country by making a stand to do my little bit. And that's why I'm here in front of you today. I'm part of Rachel's Vineyard because I'm absolutely addicted to the miracles that only happen at Rachel's Vineyard. You'd be blown away if you could see what I see. And everybody that goes to Rachel's Vineyard here in spite of me being there, not because I'm there. And I'd like to end with words from Jude and Paul that I wrote when I handed over that button and I allowed myself to feel. It's called My Precious Little Loved Ones. My precious little loved ones, I buried my feelings deep, and I never gave you a thought, and now I hardly weep. But the weeds now have all grown, and now I pull them out. I am a mother of two, and it's what I'm truly about. You knew this day would come when your mum would say your name, and you've always waited in love and never a finger pointing blame. I'm here to tell the world you existed and still do. So hello, Jude and Paul, it's a pleasure for Mother to meet you. So sad I never recognised you tugging at my skirt, and so wasted are years gone by all covered up in hurt. Jude, you were next to me, hidden by my laughter loud. And Paul, I never recognised you as I mingled with the crowd. You never left my side and you're as near as God to me, and now each day when I pray, it won't be I but always we. I know you have my smile and the tears I've held in. You know my heart was broken because of my secret sin. I have a gift to give you, a fuse to pass to you, and it belongs to a button I used to press down on cue. I pressed it to suppress my anger and cover up my fear, but now I no longer need it with you so close and near. I give it to you today, now please pass it to my dad. He's the one that walks with Mary. You already know him, he's your granddad. Thank you and God bless.